Let's be honest, life is never easy for those of us on the left. The right have the money, own the major media outlets, not to mention a roster of client journalists always eager to please the hand that feeds them. But this week has been particularly difficult. We have had the far right massing in London, with grifter Tommy Robinson leading the charge. The march attracted well over 100,000 from across the UK. So how do we respond to events of the past week, this rise of the far right, where you have 100,000 people marching in lockstep with Tommy Robinson? Well, let's look at some options. Now, this might seem like a total cop-out, but an argument can be made for it.
Tommy Robinson, whose real name is Stephen Christopher Yaxley Lennon, first gained prominence in 2009 when he founded and led the English Defence League. This movement became quite prominent for a couple of years in Britain. Robinson left the EDL in 2013. In 2018, he was brought in as an advisor for the UK Independence Party, or UKIP, which caused the immediate exit of the then former UKIP leader Nigel Farage from the party, with him accusing the new leadership of fighting a religious crusade. He also caught the attention of ex-owner Elon Musk, who requested Robinson be allowed to join Farage's Reform UK party. However, when Farage refused this request, him and Musk ended up in a social media spat. Instead, Robinson recently joined the young party Advance UK, which was founded this summer by Ben Habib. Ben Habib grew out of the Conservative Party until the Brexit negotiations period, when he joined Nigel Farage's Brexit Party and was elected as a member of the European Parliament for that very party in 2019. Habib stayed in the party through its transition to becoming Reform UK in 2021, when he became co-deputy leader. As the party truly emerged as a serious force throughout 2024, he stood twice for parliamentary elections, first in a by-election and then in the general election. However, he was not elected. This summer, he launched Advance UK, a party placed to the right of Reform UK, which has gained a lot of attention on social media, but relatively little in traditional media, and is not really featured in opinion polls. The bigger contributor, speaking for Habib and his new party and his role in the hard right, is the fact that Tommy Robinson recently joined his party, and Elon Musk has also endorsed it and is expected to donate to it. Someone else who's been busy building this movement's infrastructure is Rupert Lowe. Rupert Lowe is a businessman who in 2024 stood for the general election for Reform UK and won his seat of Great Yarmouth. However, less than a year into the parliament, Lowe ended up in conflict with Farage and left the party. It seems there had been some conflict within the parliamentary group, with Lowe wanting to take the party further to the right. But it wasn't until Farage and Musk started beefing over Robinson that it really came to fruition. When Musk withdrew his support from Farage, he suggested Lowe should take over Reform UK after Lowe had given an interview where he spoke positively of Robinson. He remains partyless, though rumours continue to circulate about him joining Advance UK or even the Conservative Party. But there's another party of the hard right these days, UKIP, which is back, though still very small, and it's much more right-wing than it's ever been. And much of that is due to its relatively new leader, Nick Tanconi. Nick Tanconi is a personal trainer who has effectively been party leader for UKIP since the start of last year, when former leader Lois Perry left due to factions of the party turning extremist. UKIP has been a non-factor in British politics since Brexit. The party still stands candidates, but with no success. However, the past year, under leadership of Tanconi, the party seems to be having a small resurgence. Tanconi has also for a few years now been the COO of Turning Point UK, the British chapter of the US organization founded by the recently murdered Charlie Kirk. And combining these two positions, he seems to have been able to create a bit of a social media following. And if this wasn't enough small hard-right parties and groups competing for the space, well, get ready to meet Lawrence Fox. Lawrence Fox isn't quite as big as he used to be on the hard right. I don't think, at least. But he's still been someone who in recent years kept fanning the flame and has played a key role in giving the movement strong views on free speech.
The point here is, with all that infighting and number of parties, isn't there a good chance that the far right in this country will simply implode in a cloud of petty bickering and recrimination? Clearly, those 100,000 people at the Unite the Kingdom March were there to support Tommy Robinson. But as we saw, he's daggers drawing with Nigel Farage, the guy leading the only hard-right party with any real electoral prospects. In fact, it's worth noting that Farage was nowhere near the march on Saturday, highlighting the dramatic fault line running right through the UK's right-wing fascist movement, which would seem like good news for us on the left.
This is a huge, patriotic, as they would put it, nationalistic, as other people would put it, crowd gathered here in the centre of London to support Tommy Robinson.
It's not going to work for a number of reasons. First of all, they don't have one particular message that they're going with. Some people are talking about, I want my country back. Others are saying, we want to stop Keir Starmer. We want to replace him. We want a general election. Other people saying they support Tommy Robinson. Others are against Islam. Others are against immigration in general. There was a mention there of protecting British heritage and British culture and British values. So it's a mix mash of a lot of different things, all marching together. So there isn't one coherent message.
The point here is not only do we have all these competing parties and personality clashes on their hard right, but even within the subset of people there at that march, there is not one cohesive objective. Calling the march Unite the Kingdom gave a blank canvas onto which the attendees could project just about anything they wanted as their reason for being there. So, when we think of this Tommy Robinson march, our mental image shouldn't be 100,000 stormtroopers goose-stepping in unison through central London with a unified purpose of overthrowing our democracy and creating a fascist dictatorship. Far from it. As we'll see later in a clip, there was even open disagreement between some of the marchers as to why they were there and what should and should not be supported. So there's an argument that could be made for ignoring the threat posed by the far right and minimising the significance of the Unite the Kingdom march. But to be honest, that's not an approach I'd be comfortable with. Now, this might seem a strange approach, but hear me out. I've no doubt the leaders of the current far-right resurgence are grifters with a simple strategy for their own political, not to mention financial advancement, namely, whip up totally unfounded fears about immigration among ordinary people and then exploit that fear for votes. But watching some of the ordinary people who were on that march actually being interviewed, I felt kind of sorry for them. Don't get me wrong, I've barked myself hoarse many times over the years at protests chanting, Nazi scum off our street, Nazi scum off our street. And when I saw those marchers interviewed, you know, I really wanted to see they were Nazi scum. But it turns out they weren't. They were just ordinary folk angry about the same things I am, and you probably are too. NHS funding, rip-off, privatised utilities, lack of affordable housing, cost of living crisis, the obvious and complete failure of our two main political parties. But the difference between you and me and them, they virtually all of them mentioned immigrants, small boat crossing, hostels, and particularly from the males, the sexual threat posed to Indigenous girls and women. But rather than just stand and shout Nazi scum off our streets at them, perhaps what I need to do is to try and understand, try and look a bit closer, try to come to grips with why these people are so obsessed and fixated on the issue of immigration. So perhaps the approach we in the left should be taking when it comes to tackling Tommy Robinson and his far-right thugs is what? Compassion, empathy, trying to achieve an understanding of why so many otherwise, I'm sure, quite nice people, sort of people you end up standing next to in the Co-op or Tesco's, are susceptible to the rantings of Tommy Robinson and his ilk.
We've seen over the weekend more protests in London, more anti-asylum seeker protests. And, I've been posing the question over quite a few different videos over the last couple of months now. What is the best way? What is the best way to stop our youngsters getting involved with this style of politics, this politics of division, this politics of hate, and instead turn them around to politics of compassion, politics of society and making a better place? How do we actually do that? And I guess there's kind of this primal instinct inside of us, really, isn't there? What these guys are protesting about right now, they're protesting about foreigners invading, taking our women. These are real primal instincts that are withheld within us for 300,000 years of evolution as hunter-gatherers. We've learned to be fearful of outsiders, fearful of strangers coming in and stealing our women. And, this is a real primal instinct, which is exactly why people like Farage, people like Trump can so easily weaponize it.
So, standing on the opposite side of the road, screaming, Nazi scum off our street, Nazi scum off our street, probably isn't going to achieve much. When it comes to people who are enthralled to deep primeval fears about strangers and people from alien cultures, perhaps what we need is some empathy for those protesters combined with our next possible approach. So when you actually talk to these protesters, actually engage with them, what do they have to say for themselves? Well, this response seems fairly typical.
Great Britain, we're in financial stump. We need to look after our own first, and once we sort our own house out, then we can look after somebody else. But until then, get our own house in order.
To be honest, he really doesn't qualify for the label Nazi scum. I think we all know someone, possibly in our own family, who could and would say this sort of thing. When you think about it, could you see yourself having a chat with that guy? Maybe talking about the state of the country, where the real problems are, where his energy should really be focused? It doesn't seem beyond the bound of possibilities. And again, here.
Do you know what I find funny, guys? That we're meant to be here at a march for the United Kingdom. But why is there so many Israel flags everywhere? Look. Israel flags everywhere, but these people claim to be marching for bringing Britain's country back. I mean, let's go. We're going to go try and catch up with them and see what they say. Can we ask you a few questions? Sure. What's the reason you're here today?
Well, of course, the same reason that everyone's here today, to show support for Britain.
Why have you got Israel flag then?
Because for almost 2 years, these rallies, demonstrations that they flood the streets with all these masked people that are so violent and nasty and so against Israel. I'm here. I came from Glasgow on my own to show a bit of support.
For Israel?
Absolutely.
But what if there was Palestine flags waving here? Do you not think there'd be a lot of commotion? So why is the Israel flag allowed to be flown in Britain?
But it's not. It's Palestine. There's no Palestine flags here today because we're here for an absolutely, totally different purpose.
So you're happy for your tax money to fund what's going on in Israel?
You see, guys, there's an awful lot of things that are we support the countries support each other. Our money goes to Pakistan, it goes to Sudan, it goes to Yemen, it goes to wherever.
Yeah.
Behind everything. Yeah.
What do you think about the Israel flags being flown at a Britain protest?
It's like the Palestine flag these days, mate.
Yeah.
It's behind everything. We're here for this country. Yeah. So that is behind everything. That's what people don't know. They're uneducated.
Yeah, they are, innit? Israel's funding all this.
They're uneducated, man. They're behind everything, man. They're behind. They're behind everything.
That's what it's for, free speech.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
In Great Britain, it's got nothing to do with us. That's as bad as flying a Palestine flag.
That there.
Right? You tell them they can't fly other countries' flags in our country, but then you fly that. It's the same thing.
It's interesting that it's other marchers who also challenge the woman from Glasgow with regard to her Israeli flag. Clearly, the demonstrators aren't just one homogeneous mass. Those guys obviously disagree with Tommy Robinson when it comes to Israel, despite the fact they were there to support a march organised by Tommy Robinson. Again, it suggests a space for engagement and discussion, possibly, but if we get as far as engaging, what exactly is our argument? What exactly is it that we're planning to say to them?
People blaming migrants, asylum seekers, and refugees for the crisis we now face, all out in support of right-wing grifter Tommy Robinson. But this hatred is misdirected. Right-wing media, politicians, and think tanks have whipped up a narrative that it's migrants and refugees that are to blame for this crisis of inequality, which is actually a crisis of greed. Last year, we saw UK billionaires increase their wealth by £35 million a day, whilst families and ordinary people struggle to pay their bills. So it's not asylum seekers driving up the price of your rents. It's not refugees increasing NHS waiting lists. And it's not migrants that are increasing the cost of living. So we need to redirect this anger to the real villains, the billionaires, the super rich, and the corporations who are not only profiting from the crises that they have caused, but profiting from the division that they are stoking in our communities.
At the end of the day, these are the arguments we need to make, and I believe they could have traction with many of the protesters. Yes, there are some truly vile racists involved in these anti-immigration protests who richly deserve the title Nazi scum. But there are many more who do not, and those are the people we need to reach. Exactly how do we do that? Well, as we all know, that's the difficult bit. One thing we do know, based on viewing figures for YouTube right-wing anti-immigration channels, is many of these protesters spend a lot of time online. That's why it's so important to support left-wing social media. The YouTube algorithm is bound to be pushing everything with an immigration or Tommy Robinson hashtag into their feed, even left-wing ones. Maybe we can at least get them to give us a hearing, get them to realise that we on the left are not the enemy, that we care about the same things they do, from the state of the NHS to the lack of affordable housing. The big difference, though, is just that we don't see immigrants as the problem or deporting them as the solution. We know who the real enemy is, and it isn't some poor sod sitting shivering in some crappy hotel in Epping or Falkirk. Please like the video and subscribe to the channel. Chat again soon.